Okay, so now that we've talked about points of engagement, how to identify them, and how they may relate or influence the revenue streams, we're going to get into how to start quantifying that value. So, how can we find evidence of value from those engagement points? So, the action is to capture quantitative and qualitative information from engagement activities and analyze to extract evidence of value delivered. To break that down a little bit, quantitative is numbers based. So, statistics, anything with a number is going to be quantitative. Stories, anecdotes, anything that does not have a number associated, but still helps to convey the value of what it is that you're doing or your collection, that is going to be qualitative. We're going to need both of those elements for value, and we're going to communicate both of those elements. So just hang on to those because we will bring them with us. And then I want you to think about, of the engagement activities, the physical and digital engagement activities that we just covered, for the ones that are relevant to you, how can we break those down and figure out how they're leading to bringing revenue in for your museum, your school, your nonprofit, wherever it is that you're at? So quantifiables, thinking about the numbers for a minute. These are typically the top ones to think about. They are perhaps the most easiest to gather. So I recommend you start here, but I also recommend you giving it some creative brainstorming thought as well, because inevitably there are going to be numbers you could find elsewhere that are maybe not as obvious, but also just as interesting or impactful. The first one, visitor numbers, the repeated and the unique. So visitor numbers, whether it's physical or digital, they could be the one-time tourist, or they could be the repeat membership card carrier, but having a sense of who your people are that are coming through your door, whether it's a physical or a digital door. We also want to take a look at duration. How long are people spending in your museum, whether it's in person or online? And with that duration, is it quality duration or not as quality, which is a bit more subjective, of course, but interesting to think about in terms of how long is long enough to be a point of engagement that's of value. Third one, increase in visitors, viewing, or duration. So any of those first two numbers, if there's any sort of increase, elongation, any numbers trending in the higher and the right direction, that is all worth noting and can definitely show a trajectory of something's going really well or like we need to adjust something. Next one, comments, discussions, questions, and insights. So the actual content of them tends to be more qualitative, but even just knowing like the numbers of comments received, the number of questions, the number of lectures or discussions that were had, those numbers can also translate into how much engagement is happening of each of those types. Next one, attention from outside audiences. So thinking about like these are the bread and butter audience, these are like the one-time tourists. And then here's like a third category of like external attention from a demographic we've not gotten before, and we're starting to notice interest from there. That is numbers that you want to pay attention to. And then finally, membership, subscriptions, followers, likes, and shares, whether it's the museum membership program or the archives YouTube channel subscription rate, all of those numbers indicate committed and consistent engagement and can be very helpful and informative in terms of what sort of engagement's happening, how much, where is it happening, all of that. Now, to think of the qualitative, we're thinking about the non-numbers. So the first and most obvious is any sort of stories and anecdotes that you pick up, you hear, you see happen, that you've read about. It's always good to write those down because there's not going to be a statistics dashboard that will capture those types of things for you, at least not typically. Next one is notes of gratitude or reviews. So whether a handwritten note from a volunteer or a grant agency providing a project review, all of those types of qualitative content type feedback is also very helpful. And it helps because it affirms, it's an external validation point that can help have more weight than the staff saying it to their boss, for example. Next one, insights from experience. So you as the collection workers, as the ones in the space working with the collections, the insights that you have, while it may be somewhat difficult to translate for our non-collection workers, those are also great points of qualitative that are worth writing down and figuring out how to translate. And then other attention grabbing information. So anything that wasn't already covered here, if it is of note, if it's interesting, if it's funny, if it's important or a great observation, all of these can be quite persuasive when presented while you're making a case for something.